The gleaming yacht cut through the calm waters of the Pacific, its pristine white hull reflecting the golden rays of the setting sun. Marcus Reynolds stood at the helm, enjoying a peaceful evening cruise with his family, when his daughter Emma's scream pierced the tranquil atmosphere. "Dad, look, there's something in the water." Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel as he spotted a dark shape moving deliberately alongside their vessel. His wife Catherine rushed to the railing, her face etched with concern. As the shape drew closer, they realized it was a young orca, barely larger than a dolphin, swimming with unusual persistence near their boat. "There's something in its mouth," Emma called out, her voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and worry. The young whale circled the yacht again, this time slower, deliberately showing them what it carried, a piece of bright orange material that looked suspiciously like part of a fishing net. The small orca's behavior was unlike anything Marcus had ever witnessed in his 20 years of sailing. The creature wasn't just swimming, it was trying to communicate. Each time it surfaced, it would look directly at them with an intelligence that sent chills down Marcus's spine. The whale would swim a short distance away, then return, as if beckoning them to follow. "Dad, I think it wants us to go with it," Emma insisted, her 13-year-old face flush with conviction. Marcus exchanged glances with Catherine, who nodded slowly. Something wasn't right, and they both felt it. "Call the Marine Rescue," Catherine said, already reaching for her phone. "See how this isn't normal behavior." As Catherine dialed, the young orca became more agitated, slapping its tail against the water and emitting sharp, urgent calls that echoed across the evening sea. The sun was sinking lower on the horizon, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples, but the growing darkness couldn't mask the distress in the young whale's movements. The Marine Rescue Team responded quickly to Catherine's call, but their words offered little comfort. "It'll take us at least 40 minutes to reach your location," the dispatcher explained. "Can you maintain visual contact with the juvenile orca?" Marcus watched as the young whale continued its desperate ballet around their yacht. "Yes, but something's wrong. This isn't just curious behavior. It's trying to show us something." Emma, who had been quietly observing the orca, suddenly gasped. "Look at the scars on its back," she pointed out. Fresh scratches marked the young whale's skin. Not deep wounds, but recent ones that suggested a struggle. The fading light cast long shadows across the water as Marcus made a decision that would change the course of their evening. With careful movements, he began to follow the young orca's lead, maintaining a safe distance but allowing the whale to guide them. The yacht's engines hummed softly as they moved further from their planned route. "Marine rescue is on their way," Catherine announced, ending her call. "They're sending their fastest response vessel." The young orca seemed to understand they were following, its movements becoming more purposeful. The piece of orange netting still clutched in its mouth caught the last rays of sunlight, like a beacon leading them forward. As they moved further from the familiar coastline, the gravity of the situation began to weigh on them all. The sound of the young whale's calls changed, becoming more frequent and urgent. Something in those cries spoke of desperation, of a need so pressing it transcended the barriers between species. Marcus felt it in his bones. They weren't just following a curious marine mammal. They were being led to something important, something that couldn't wait for official help to arrive. The last traces of daylight were fading when they heard it, a deep, mournful call that seemed to vibrate through the hull of the yacht itself. The young orca immediately responded with a series of sharp clicks and whistles, swimming faster now, its dorsal fin cutting through the darkening water with renewed urgency. "There." Emma pointed to a disturbance in the water about 200 yards ahead. In the growing darkness, they could make out something large breaking the surface, moving in an unnatural pattern. Marcus reached for the yacht's powerful spotlights, switching them on and directing them toward the disturbance. The beam cut through the twilight, illuminating a scene that made Catherine cover her mouth in horror. A massive adult orca, easily 20 feet long, was entangled in what appeared to be an abandoned fishing net. The net had wrapped around her body, binding one of her fins tightly against her side. With each movement, the netting seemed to constrict further, like a python slowly crushing its prey. "Oh my God," Catherine whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of waves lapping against the hull. The adult orca was struggling to stay near the surface, her movements becoming increasingly labored. The young whale, clearly her calf, swam circles around her, still carrying that piece of orange netting in its mouth like a desperate plea for help. Marcus immediately grabbed his marine radio. "Mayday, mayday! This is the Yacht Northern Star. We've located an adult orca severely entangled in fishing gear. Position." He rattled off their coordinates, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The response was immediate, but not encouraging. "Northern Star, rescue vessel is still 25 minutes from your location. Do not attempt to approach the animal. Adult orcas can be extremely dangerous, especially when distressed." But as they watched the struggling whale, it became clear that 25 minutes might be too long. The adult orca's movements were becoming more erratic, her breathing labored. Each time she surfaced, the effort seemed to cost her more energy. "She's dying," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, we have to do something." Marcus was already moving, his mind racing through his years of diving experience. He had a rescue knife in his gear, designed for cutting through rope and netting. But approaching a distressed orca, the mere thought went against everything he knew about marine safety. The calf continued its urgent patrol around their yacht, its behavior becoming increasingly agitated. It would swim to its mother, then back to the boat, each circuit more frantic than the last. The piece of netting in its mouth now seemed less like a random object and more like a deliberate message, a plea for the same thing that had trapped its mother. Catherine grabbed Marcus's arm as he began pulling out his diving gear. "You can't be serious," she said, but her voice held no conviction. They both knew what had to be done. "I've got the rescue knife, and I'm a certified rescue diver," he replied, already checking his equipment. "If we wait, she'll either drown or get so tangled she won't survive." The adult orca breached again, this time closer to the boat. In the spotlight's beam, they could see her eye, intelligent, aware, and filled with what could only be described as desperation. The calf made a series of clicking sounds that seemed to echo through the gathering darkness. Marcus looked at his family, then at the struggling whale. "Catherine, keep the spotlight on her. Emma, maintain radio contact with rescue. I'm going in." The water was cold as Marcus slipped over the side of the yacht, but the chill was nothing compared to the fear gripping his chest. Everything he knew about marine safety told him this was madness. Approaching a distressed orca could be fatal, yet something in the way the calf had sought them out, in the intelligence behind those eyes, made him believe this was different. As he floated in the dark water, the young orca approached him slowly, almost cautiously. It circled him once, twice, before swimming toward its mother. Marcus followed, his heart pounding against his ribs, knowing that the next few minutes would either be the bravest or the last decision he would ever make. The water seemed to pulse with an electric tension as Marcus swam closer to the entangled orca. Every movement felt like an eternity, each stroke bringing him nearer to either a miracle or disaster. The spotlight from the yacht cut through the darkness, creating an otherworldly stage for what was about to unfold. The adult orca was massive, far larger than Marcus had estimated from the boat. Her black and white coloring gleamed in the artificial light, but the beauty of the creature was marred by the thick fishing nets that bound her. The netting was industrial grade, the kind used by commercial fishing vessels, and it had wrapped around her body in multiple layers. The worst of it had caught her right pectoral fin, pulling it tight against her body in an unnatural position that must have been agonizing. As Marcus drew closer, he could see the full extent of the damage. The netting hadn't just trapped the whale, it was slowly killing her. With each movement, the ropes tightened further, cutting into her skin. Fresh wounds marked where she had struggled against her bonds, and her breathing was becoming more labored by the minute. The young calf continued its patrol, swimming between Marcus and its mother as if trying to facilitate an introduction. Its behavior was extraordinary. Instead of showing aggression toward the approaching human, it seemed to be actively helping, guiding Marcus to the spots where the netting was worst. "I'm at the whale's position," Marcus called out through his diving radio, his voice tight with tension. "The entanglement is severe. She's got multiple layers of netting around her body, concentrating on the right pectoral fin. Be careful, honey. Catherine's voice crackled through the radio. "Rescue team says they're 15 minutes out." Marcus knew they didn't have 15 minutes. The adult orca's movements were becoming weaker, and her breaching for air was less frequent. He needed to act now. With trembling hands that he forced to steady, Marcus pulled out his rescue knife. The serrated edge was designed specifically for cutting through rope and fishing line, but he'd never tested it against industrial netting. He moved closer to the orca, his heart thundering in his chest. The massive creature turned her eye toward him, and Marcus found himself frozen in place. There was an intelligence there that seemed to peer into his soul, an awareness that made him question everything he thought he knew about these creatures. The eye blinked, and in that moment, Marcus swore he saw understanding. He began with the netting around the pectoral fin, knowing this was causing the most immediate distress. The knife bit into the thick rope, but progress was agonizingly slow. Each cut required all his strength, and the netting was layered so tightly that he had to be extremely careful not to nick the whale's skin. Time seemed to lose all meaning as Marcus worked. His world narrowed to the rhythm of cut, pull, check, breathing, repeat. The adult orca remained surprisingly still, as if she understood his intentions. Every few minutes, she would need to surface for air, and Marcus would have to quickly back away, waiting for her to return to her previous position. The calf maintained its vigil, swimming circles around them both, occasionally emitting clicks and whistles that seemed to calm its mother. The communication between the two whales was constant, a symphony of sounds that Marcus could hear clearly through the water. As he worked through the layers of netting, Marcus began to understand the true intelligence of these creatures. The calf hadn't just randomly found their boat. It had deliberately sought help, knowing its mother was in danger. The piece of netting it had carried in its mouth wasn't random. It was showing them exactly what was wrong. "So how's it going down there?" Catherine's voice broke through his concentration. "Making progress," Marcus responded, his breathing heavy from exertion. "The netting around the fin is almost clear, but there's still so much more." The water was getting colder, and Marcus's muscles were beginning to ache from the constant tension and effort. But he couldn't stop now. With each piece of netting he cut away, the adult orca's movements became slightly easier, her breathing less labored. Then came the moment that would be forever etched in Marcus's memory. As he worked on a particularly difficult knot, the adult orca slowly, deliberately rolled slightly to her side, giving him better access to a section of netting he had been struggling to reach. The movement was so careful, so precise, that it could not have been accidental. "She's helping me," he whispered into his radio, his voice thick with emotion. "She understands what I'm trying to do." The calf seemed to pick up on the breakthrough, its clicks becoming more excited, more frequent. It swam closer to Marcus than it had before, almost touching him as it passed, as if encouraging him to continue. Just then, a distant rumble of engines announced the approach of the rescue vessel. Help was finally arriving, but Marcus was determined to free as much of the netting as he could before they took over. His fingers were numb from the cold water, and his muscles screamed in protest, but he kept cutting, kept pulling, kept working to free this magnificent creature from her bonds. The rescue vessel's powerful engines cut through the night as it approached, its emergency lights casting alternating patterns of red and blue across the dark water. Marcus could hear the increasing roar of the motors, but he remained focused on his task, knowing that every second counted. "Marine rescue approaching your position." A new voice crackled through the radio. "Sir, we need you to clear the area immediately. We're deploying our specialized team." But Marcus knew he couldn't stop now. He had just reached a critical point in the rescue, a complex knot of netting that was wrapped tightly around the orca's midsection, restricting her breathing. The massive creature's movements had become increasingly labored, and her breaching for air was growing more desperate. "Just a few more minutes," he called back, his voice strained from exhaustion. "I've almost got this section clear." The rescue vessel's spotlight joined the beam from Marcus's yacht, illuminating the scene in harsh white light. The adult orca's skin glistened in the artificial daylight, revealing dozens of fresh cuts and abrasions from her struggles against the netting. The sight only strengthened Marcus's resolve to continue. The calf's behavior changed with the arrival of the rescue boat. It became more agitated, swimming faster circles around its mother and Marcus, its clicks and whistles taking on a more urgent tone. The sound of the approaching engines seemed to distress both whales, but neither made any attempt to flee. "Stand down, sir," the rescue team leader commanded through the radio. "You're putting yourself at risk. These are wild animals in distress. The situation is extremely dangerous." Catherine's voice joined the radio chatter. "Marcus, maybe you should let the professionals take over now. You've done more than enough." But Marcus could feel the trust he had built with these magnificent creatures. The adult orca had remained remarkably calm during his efforts, even helping him access difficult areas. He couldn't break that trust now, not when they were so close to success. "The mother is too distressed," he responded, his breath coming in short gasps as he worked on another section of netting. "If you approach with your team now, she might panic. Just give me a few more minutes to clear this critical area." The rescue vessel maintained its distance, but Marcus could see the team preparing their equipment. They had specialized cutting tools and safety gear that would make the job easier, but he knew that approaching with a large team now could prove disastrous. The next few minutes were a blur of intense focus and physical strain. Marcus's muscles burned from the constant effort, and the cold water had numbed his extremities, making it harder to manipulate the rescue knife. But he pressed on, encouraged by the increasing freedom of the orca's movements as each section of netting fell away. The adult whale's intelligence continued to amaze him. She seemed to understand exactly what he was trying to do, adjusting her position slightly whenever he struggled with a particular section. The calf maintained its protective circling, but now it would occasionally brush past Marcus gently, almost like a gesture of encouragement. A particularly challenging knot near the orca's tail flukes tested the limits of Marcus's endurance. The netting here was pulled so tight that getting the knife underneath without risking injury to the whale seemed impossible. As he struggled with this section, the adult orca did something extraordinary. She lifted her tail slowly, deliberately, allowing him better access to the tangled mess. "Did you see that?" Marcus called through his radio, his voice filled with wonder. "She's actively helping me free her." The rescue team had witnessed the interaction, and their tone changed from urgent command to cautious amazement. "Understood, sir. Continue with your efforts, but please be aware we're standing by if you need assistance." As Marcus worked on the final sections of netting, he became aware of a subtle change in the water around him. The adult orca's movements were becoming more fluid, more natural. Her breathing had steadied, and her surfaces for air seemed less desperate. The calf's clicks and whistles had taken on a different tone, less distressed, more excited. Then came a moment that would be forever etched in Marcus's memory. As he cut through the last major section of netting, the adult orca made a sound unlike anything he had heard before, a long, deep call that seemed to vibrate through the water and into his very bones. The calf responded with a series of rapid clicks and whistles, swimming faster circles around them both. The netting began to fall away in larger pieces now, drifting down into the dark water below. With each section that was cleared, the orca's movements became more free, more powerful. Marcus could feel the energy building in the massive creature beside him, like a spring slowly being released. But they weren't finished yet. Several smaller sections of netting remained, tangled around the orca's body like persistent reminders of her ordeal. The rescue team was growing increasingly anxious, aware that as the whale regained her strength, the situation could become more dangerous. The final phase of the rescue proved to be the most delicate. As Marcus worked on the remaining sections of netting, the adult orca's newfound freedom of movement created both opportunity and challenge. Each piece he removed allowed her greater range of motion, but also increased the risk that a sudden movement could pull him into danger. The rescue team maintained their position nearby, their spotlights creating a bright arena in the dark water. They had deployed 2 divers who now waited at a safe distance, ready to assist if needed. The night had grown deeper, and the temperature of the water seemed to drop with each passing minute. But Marcus barely noticed the cold anymore. His entire world had narrowed to this moment, to each cut of his knife, to each reaction of the massive creature beside him. The calf's behavior had evolved as the rescue progressed. It no longer showed signs of distress, but instead seemed to be celebrating each small victory. Every time a piece of netting fell away, it would emit a series of rapid clicks that sounded remarkably like excitement. Its swimming pattern had changed too, no longer the tight, anxious circles of before, but wider, more relaxed loops around its mother and Marcus. As he worked on one of the final sections wrapped around the orca's dorsal fin, Marcus became aware of something extraordinary. The adult whale was producing a series of low-frequency vibrations that he could feel through his entire body. The rescue team's marine biologist, monitoring from their vessel, broke in over the radio. "Those are what we call victory calls," she explained, her voice filled with wonder. "They're typically used when pods celebrate successful hunts or births. She's thanking you." The realization nearly made Marcus lose his grip on his knife. These weren't just animals he was helping. They were intelligent, emotional beings who understood exactly what was happening. The adult orca turned her eye toward him again, and this time Marcus was certain he saw gratitude in that ancient gaze. With renewed determination, he tackled the remaining netting. His hands were shaking from exhaustion, but each cut was easier than the last as the mass of tangled rope began to lose its grip on the whale's body. The rescue team's divers had moved closer now, collecting the floating pieces of netting to prevent them from causing harm to other marine life. Then, nearly 3 hours after Marcus had first entered the water, he cut through the final strand of netting. The last piece floated away into the dark water, and for a moment everything seemed to stop. The adult orca remained still, as if processing her newfound freedom. The calf paused its swimming, hovering near its mother's head. What happened next would become a story Marcus would tell for the rest of his life. The adult orca began to move, slowly at first, testing her restored range of motion. She dipped beneath the surface, then rose again, each movement becoming more confident, more powerful. The calf joined her, their movements synchronizing in what looked like an underwater dance. Then, in a display that left everyone watching in awe, both whales surged upward. They breached the surface in perfect unison, their massive bodies clearing the water entirely before crashing back down in a spectacular splash that rocked both vessels. The sound of their re-entry echoed across the water like a thunderclap. "Dad, that was amazing." Emma's voice crackled through the radio, thick with emotion. Marcus could hear Catherine crying in the background, overwhelmed by the display. But the whales weren't finished. Instead of swimming away as expected, they began a series of increasingly spectacular behaviors. They spy-hopped near the boats, rising vertically out of the water to observe their rescuers. They rolled onto their sides, slapping the water with their pectoral fins in what the marine biologist called a clear sign of joy and celebration. The calf approached Marcus one final time, swimming so close he could have reached out and touched it. Its eye met his, and in that moment he felt a connection that transcended species. This young whale had understood enough to seek help, to trust humans despite the fact that human fishing gear had nearly killed its mother. The intelligence and emotional depth in that gaze would stay with Marcus forever. As the rescue team helped Marcus back onto his yacht, his body finally registering the full extent of his exhaustion, the whales began their farewell performance. They moved in perfect synchronization, creating a series of water spouts with their blowholes that caught the spotlights and transformed into shimmering cascades. The sound of their calls filled the air, no longer distressed or urgent, but melodic and joyful. They accompanied both vessels partway back to shore, swimming alongside like an honor guard. The calf would occasionally race ahead, then double back, its exuberance impossible to contain. The adult orca maintained a more dignified pace, but her movements were strong and sure, showing no lasting effects from her ordeal. As they neared more trafficked waters, the whales began to peel away. Before departing, they gave one final display, a synchronized breach that seemed to pierce the very night sky, their massive bodies silhouetted against the stars before returning to the sea in a spectacular splash. Emma, who had been documenting everything on her phone, captured the moment perfectly. In the footage, you could hear her father's exhausted but joyful laugh, her mother's quiet sobs of relief, and the amazed exclamations of the rescue team. But most striking were the sounds of the whales themselves. Their calls seemed to carry emotions that required no translation: gratitude, joy, and freedom. The Marine Rescue Team would later report this as one of the most remarkable whale encounters in their history. The level of trust and cooperation shown by both whales, particularly the calf's initial seeking of help, would become the subject of scientific papers and discussions about cetacean intelligence. For Marcus and his family, the night marked a profound change in how they viewed the ocean and its inhabitants. They had witnessed something extraordinary, not just a rescue, but a moment of connection between species that defied explanation. The image of that young orca, carrying a piece of netting in its mouth as it sought help for its mother, would remain with them forever, a testament to the intelligence, emotional capacity, and trust that can exist between humans and the magnificent creatures with whom we share our planet. As they finally turned toward home, the distant sounds of whale calls following them across the water, Marcus looked at his family, at Emma's shining eyes, at Catherine's proud smile, and knew that while they had saved a whale that night, they had received something equally precious in return, a reminder of the incredible bonds that can form when we choose to help, to trust, and to believe in the extraordinary possibilities that exist in our ordinary world. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of captivating stories. I trust you found today's narrative as engaging as I did. If you enjoyed this exploration into fascinating and compelling narratives, kindly indicate your appreciation by liking this video. Are you watching on mobile? Show your appreciation with a double tap for hype. For more captivating stories and journeys into the heart of compelling storytelling, please subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Your thoughts and interpretations are most welcome. Please share your perspectives on today's story in the comments below. And if you believe others would find this content engaging, please consider sharing the video with your network. Until our next journey into the world of captivating tales, I bid you farewell.